Hey guys, what is up? This is going to be my thoughts and breakdown over Invincible, Season 3, Episode 5, titled This Was Supposed to Be Easy. Now, this is just my main thoughts. I might be missing certain things from the show, but this is just kind of the thoughts that I had that I kind of wrote down. I'll be going over those notes of what I thought about the show, and I would love to hear what you guys think about the show down in the comments down below. But I thought this was another really fun episode. It wasn't super integral, at least at the moment. It's not as super integral to the whole plot of Invincible, but some of those episodes are sometimes the best episodes in the series when the plot it doesn't necessarily matter as much. Now, something that I titled it personally. I understand the title is This Was Supposed to Be Easy, but my personal title is called Titan Playing Chess, Everyone Else is Playing Checkers, and Mark is trying to decide not to play. And I do think eventually Mark is going to have to decide to play. And that gets deeper into a philosophical argument that I'll hit on in just a little bit, but that is to me what this show, the core of it was really about. And of course, get this part out of the way because this is the part that it's fine for me. This episode, this part was fine, but it wasn't as important to me as some of the other elements in the show, which really deals with Mark and Eve and their relationship and trying to figure out what they're going to do, not just to maybe live alone or to stay where they're living, but also the idea that, what are they going to do to make some money? Because they don't have the resources from the government, they're not government funded, and so they have to be able to provide for themselves somehow while still being able to be a hero. And Eve comes up with this idea about basically being security, about being security for these high level prisons where these villains are, and that basically they're on contract. So if something really bad happens and they get a call, they got to stop what they're doing, they got to go save the day over at this prison. And so that whole dynamic, everything, the plot points of that, and them deciding if he's going to stay living it with his family or if he's going to go off and do something else, I think was really enjoyable to watch. But it's not the most enjoyable thing that I want to talk about in the show. So I just kind of want to mention it and then move on from it because there's other things that I would prefer to talk about dealing with this episode. Which one of the biggest things is dealing with Multi-Paul and Multi-Kate's relationship, but specifically Multi-Paul and his choices, and specifically how he chose the first time and even the second time to try to escape prison. It's like, I don't know, when they grew up and they were getting experimented on by the government, all the things that, the government was forcing them to do. But it is kind of wild how they can be content with just letting themselves die in the most brutal ways possible. And it reminded me of the situation in Korea that happened not too long ago. It was probably about a year ago, I think, or maybe a year and a half ago, but where these people got stuck in this hall. And it's like this famous area in South Korea, and I believe it's in Seoul, and people got stuck there and they couldn't move, and more people started piling in, and people couldn't get out. And everyone freaked out. So instead of trying to help figure out how to get everyone out safely, everyone was freaking out, which was just making everybody more compacted. And a lot of people died. A lot of people died. And the one person that made it okay in that situation was one person before everyone got squished. He realized what was going on, and he literally climbed up on a pole. He was the only one to do it. He climbed up on a pole while everyone was getting squished below him. He was above, not getting squished, and was able to live another day. Well, that's kind of what this episode, that's kind of what Paul does. He goes up on top of the light area and then allows his other versions of himself to basically squish them to death, to pry the door open. And that was a lot. Even my wife was sitting there watching it with me as she was doing other things, and she goes, "Oh goodness." And I was like, yeah, because it was rough, man. It was, talk about, some bloody violence. It was some bloody violence. That was pretty rough to watch. But that said, he tries to get out. He doesn't get out that time. But Mr. Liu, the crime lord, following the world order or whatever, he wants him out. And he's becoming even more impatient about it. And he basically is giving Titan an ultimatum. It's like, you love your wife, you love your kid, you love how safe you made your community. Well, if you do not step up, I will have you replaced. And Titan understands that. Titan understands the reality of this and knows that he has to do something different. And what's cool is seeing the respect that he's gotten from his community, and he really has changed it. He made a comment to Invincible in the show about this place was a lot different the last time you saw it, and it was really different. I had to think about it. I was like, man, because it's been a while since I've watched those episodes with Titan, and it's like, oh wow, yeah, he has made some major changes to his community in this area, which was really cool to see. And he presents a question to Mark, which is basically like, help me. Like, help me do what I need to do to stay in power to stop these people. And Mark is like, no, I'm not going to do this. And Mark is definitely dealing with a deontological approach, whereas, Titan is utilitarian. It's like, I can't control everything, but I can control this. And I'm good at controlling this where my community is still safe. Whereas Mark is saying, right is right, wrong is wrong. I'm not going to participate in this, even if the outcome is a negative one. And, a lot of times, certain things, like you watch, like Civil War, Marvel's Civil War with Captain America and Iron Man. That might be a time where deontological, I would actually agree with Captain America. But there's certain times where you have to balance that out, and you have to figure out the right way to play the game. And it does seem like Mark is refusing to play while everyone else is trying to play. And maybe the only option really there was a utilitarian approach, which is what, Titan pursues. And Titan plays the game very, very well. Now, this time Titan was actually, I've heard people giving credit to Mahershala Ali this episode, but actually, supposedly he's been recast, which is kind of funny because we've talked about and we've complained. All of us have complained about how they keep on getting these celebrity actors to come in and fill these roles, which are paying way too much money for them, whereas they could be spending more money on animation and having better animation for their story for the show. And even though I do still feel that way, they did recast him. Now, I don't know what happened with Mahershala. I don't know if they just couldn't afford to get him back. I don't know if he decided to not come back for different reasons, or for some reason, scheduling, whatever, he just wasn't able to come. But they recast him with a guy named Todd Williams, and I thought he did a really fantastic job. So good on him, and I'm glad he got that opportunity to play Titan. And I think, what he did worked in the show. Now, I was happy to see some of these smaller things before we get back into the big things again. I was happy to see, Oliver not be a murderer. It was fun for him to find new friends and interact. People, they were nervous. Eve and Invincible were nervous when, Invincible's mom knocks on the door and says, hey, I can't find Oliver. I don't know where he's at. Well, he was hanging out with friends, and the friends are accepting of him being purple and having powers and all those things. They're totally cool with it. They have no problem with it, and they just want to be his friend. And so that was a lot of fun to see. And then when the big guys come in, you're wondering, okay, what is Oliver going to do? Is Oliver going to be a murderer? Is he going to kill these people? And he doesn't. He does something much more funny, and he pants them, and, the kids laugh, and it's a good moment. It's a good, okay, like Oliver might be okay. Oliver may not become a super deranged, evil Viltrumite killer like, his ancestors were. So that was cool to see, and, it was just a fun moment to have some levity. It was cool to see Rex winning over his lady. He's had trouble with the women in the past, not from getting women, but from treating them well. And it seems like Rex is slowly learning, okay, this is what I need to do to win over, a lady and actually treat her well, and then keep her around, And it seems like he's learning that lesson, and I thought it was very kind of him to be trying to make this meal, for his lady. And I'm blanking on the character's name, but it was nice of him to try to win her over, and that was cool to see. I also respect, because I haven't read the comics, at least to this point. I'm very behind. I'm like literally at the beginning of the comics, and it's just hard to read everything, right? There's just too much to read, And I don't know if I'll ever fully would catch up, but I want to be able to be fully caught up with Invincible completely by the time the fourth season comes out. That's kind of a personal goal of mine. I hope by the time fourth season comes out, I am caught up with everything. That way, I know the characters deeper than I do now, and, you know, I can have better ideas of where things are headed in the show. But the one glad thing, and the reason I'm glad I haven't caught up yet, was because it was fun for me not to know where Isotope was going to go. I didn't know if he was going to stick by Titan, if he was going to betray Titan. It seemed like every step of the show, he seemed like he was going to betray everybody. And so it was kind of interesting to see him play the game and see how he played it in the show when Mr. Liu comes in and confronts Titan, and seems like they may have killed Titan. And then, of course, Liu, as the dragon, goes to break out Multipole in prison. And, you know, I think it was, you know, cool to see the dragon's power, just getting into that whole fight that happens between the dragon and Invincible and Eve. I think that whole element was a lot of fun. You know, it shows how powerful he is. And so I don't know if he's going to be important when the Viltrumites come. But to me, he's somebody that, even though he's a villain, he is somebody that I would preferably have in my pocket just in case things really go down, because he seems like he's somebody who could really take on a couple Viltrumites. I could be wrong on that, but it seemed like he was giving, you know, Mark a hard time. And so to see him go after some of these, you know, Viltrumites, I think will be pretty interesting. You know, Multipole using his powers, I just thought it was a cool way. You know, sometimes there's interesting power sets that we really don't get to see played out because, you know, a lot of people will reuse the same way that, you know, stretching abilities work, or they'll reuse the same way that something like a multiple man would work. But what was cool about this is that it seemed like for the first time we're seeing a different way that a multiple man would work, and how he would use his powers to evade attacks and do other things. And that was really cool to see. That was really cool to see how he uses his powers. And the backstory between Multipole and Multicate I thought was really interesting. The fact that they were grown up, they were basically science experiments. I thought, you know, their choices and why they made the choices they made was really interesting, and made them more layered characters that I would want to know more about. And, you know, when all this is said and done, it really comes out that Titan was always on top at the very beginning of everything. You have his conversations not just with Mark, but with Machine Head as well. And you realize that Machine Head is also someone who escaped the prison, and he is going to seemingly murder Mr. Liu. And it seemed like he did. It seemed like he did. And you're thinking, okay, Isotope double-crossed Titan, and he double-crossed, you know, Mr. Liu. Well, it seems that maybe this was a deal at the very beginning between Titan and Machine Head, where Machine Head kills the leader of the Order, which then allows them to make this treaty with each other where Titan becomes the new, you know, stays the position he's in, but then Machine Head gets to move up into the higher ranks of the Order. And it was just a well-played game. You know, he knew he had to play the game, and he played it really well. And so that was a lot of fun to watch and really cool to see with that character, and see him come out on top. I thought was really special. You know, all this said, it just really makes me want to read the comics more. I know there's differences in the comics and the show, and I know they do things differently. I know the show seems to be paying really good tribute to the comics, but they change smaller things. And they go, okay, what could make this story a little better in this circumstance? And it's not always the case. It's not always the case. But you can definitely tell that there's certain times where they've made the story better and were rewarded for it. But I do know that they've taken out some characters, for example, because those characters were owned by other Image comic creators. I really wish that Amazon's a big company. You know, if you're going to spend as much money as you do on something as terrible as Rings of Power, you think you could spend a little extra money on maybe the rights of some of those other characters to be in this show, to give us a true adaptation of this show. Because I've already heard some things, like there's a character called Wolfman that looked really cool that I don't think we're going to get, you know, from from the comics because he's owned by a different person. There's also, I think, another guy named Griggs who's like a military guy, but since he's also owned by a different company, a different guy, it's just I don't think it's going to happen, which is a bummer because there's a character called Techno Jacket that I've been spoiled about a little bit that seems awesome. And I really want that character to be in this show eventually, and I don't know if we're going to see it, but at least if I get to read the comics, I get to have that full experience the way that it was meant to be shown originally. So anyway, this show makes me want to read the comics even more, especially at the end when they tease the fact that Mr. Liu is actually alive. Now, I do wonder if he's alive or if it's the dragon. I don't know how that relationship really works between him and the dragon. So that's something that's pretty interesting to me. But to see that play out, I wonder what's going to happen there. Is he going to go to war with the Order? Is Multipol gone back to the Order? Because we see that he leaves a message to his sister to show that he's out. And, we don't know what's going to happen to him. So lots of interesting things with this episode. A lot of things I'm happy with. But what about you guys? What did you like about the show? Was there certain elements that made you wondering more? I would be really curious to hear your thoughts. And guys, another good episode. I will see you next week when we go over episode 6. And leave it with this. Whatever you're doing, wherever you're going, I hope you're having a good one. Peace.